20 years ago, a treasure hunter disappeared somewhere in these mountains. Today, you find his backpack. It is wedged beneath the roots of a fallen pine, half buried in Gray Creek gravel, where spring runoff has cut a new channel through the forest. The fabric used to be red. Now it is the color of dried blood and rust. One shoulder strap is torn, the zipper is frozen with dirt, and tied beneath the top flap is a small aluminum tag, stamped with two initials you recognize from an old missing person story, AR. You almost leave it where it is, then you see the plastic sleeve inside. A journal. The first pages are swollen from years of moisture, but the center is dry. There are maps folded between the pages, hand-drawn ridge lines, measurements, sketches of rock formations, and dates from the summer of 2006. The handwriting grows messier. As the dates get closer to the day, the owner vanished. The final entry is only 6 lines long, July 17. The stones finally match the photograph. I was wrong about the river. The white face is not the marker, it is the door. The entrance is inside, and that is where the sentence stops. No period, no next page, no explanation. 20 years ago, search teams spent weeks looking for the man who wrote that line. They found his truck at a trailhead. They found an empty campsite 7 miles in. They found one boot print near a creek crossing after rain. Then nothing. No body, no backpack, no treasure, until now. The missing man was Alden Rook, a part-time surveyor who had spent almost 9 years chasing a story. Most people in this part of the country treated like a campfire legend. Rook was not famous. That is part of why his disappearances faded so quickly. He was not a television treasure hunter, not a millionaire funding helicopter searches. Not the kind of person whose face stays on magazine covers. He worked seasonal contracts, saved money, disappeared into the mountains on weekends, and kept almost everything he learned to himself. By 2006, people who knew him said the payroll story had stopped being a hobby. It had become the structure of his life. When he vanished, authorities treated the case like a wilderness accident. That made sense. His truck was still parked. Weather had turned bad. The terrain was steep. Searchers assumed a fall, exposure, or a river crossing gone wrong. The treasure story was mentioned, but mostly as background. The official search was looking for a person, not a strongbox. Now that old assumption starts to look shaky. Because if Rook was simply lost, the journal should become less organized near the end. Instead, the opposite happens. His measurements get tighter. His sketches become more precise. The last 10 pages look like someone eliminating uncertainty, not someone wandering deeper into it. In 1911, a mining company sent a payroll shipment through this range after a bridge washed out on the main road. The shipment never arrived. Records from the mine listed gold coins, assay bars, and cash meant for nearly 200 workers. At the time, it was worth a little over $30,000. If most of the recorded value was in coin and bullion, the metal alone would be worth several million today, before any collector premium. The story says the strongbox was hidden before a storm closed the pass. The men who knew where it went never came back for it. By the time Rook vanished, people had been searching every creek, cabin, mine shaft, and ridge within 20 miles for nearly a century. Rook believed they were all looking in the wrong place, and now his journal is in your hands. You do the first thing every sensible person would tell you not to do. You keep reading. The early pages are boring in the way. Obsession usually looks before it becomes important. Dates, distances, elevation changes, old property lines, notes copied from county records. He compared 3 different survey maps from 3 different decades and kept circling the same. Contradiction: an abandoned wagon route seemed to move almost half a mile between maps. At first, it looks like a mapping error. Rook did not think it was. On one page he wrote, "Road did not move. Reference point did." Underneath that, he taped a faded black and white photograph. The picture shows 4 miners standing beside a loaded wagon. Behind them is a pale triangular patch of exposed stone on a mountainside. Someone years later drew an X over that pale patch and wrote "white face" along the margin. That photograph had been reproduced in books about the missing payroll for decades. Searchers treated the pale rock as the landmark. Find the white face, find the old wagon route, find the route, find the strongbox. Rook had crossed it out. Beside the X he wrote one word: wrong. You study the photograph longer. There is nothing else obvious in it. A wagon, 4 men, a tree line, a white rock face, and near the lower corner, the blurred edge of something dark that might be a boulder close to the camera. Then you notice Rook measured that blur. He drew lines from it to the mountain behind the men. He wrote angles in the margin. He even sketched the same scene upside down. Whatever he saw, he thought the answer was not in the background. It was near the person taking the picture. That gives you your first real question. The question is not what the camera was pointed at. It is where the photographer was standing. The map in the journal has more than 30 marks, but most are crossed out. 5 remain. One is less than a mile from where you found the backpack. Before you move, you empty the rest of the pack onto a flat rock. There is no wallet, no food, no sleeping bag. That initially feels wrong until you remember the search report said. Rook had established a small camp farther up the drainage. This was probably the pack he carried on the final push, not his full camp load. There is a brass key on a leather loop, a scratched compass, a folding knife with one broken tip, 2 pencils sharpened with a knife, a film canister containing 3 tiny flakes of pale stone, and an empty cardboard coin holder with a circular impression pressed into the paper. The coin holder is the thing that bothers you. Someone wrote 1911 reference on it in pencil. On the inside flap, Rook added 4 words: need one from box. That is stricter than simply finding a loose old coin somewhere in the mountains. A coin dated before 1911 could have traveled anywhere in 100 years. Rook wanted one tied to the strongbox itself, in a place where chance could not explain it. So the empty holder is not proof. It tells you what proof would look like. And somewhere near the end of this route, Rook expected to find it. The route follows the creek for a while, then climbs through old lodgepole pine. Nothing looks dramatic. Treasure stories train you to expect obvious things: caves, abandoned cabins, giant trees, a perfect X in the dirt. Real hiding places rarely look that cooperative. After 40 minutes, you find the first mark from Rook's journal. It is not a landmark, it is a mistake. An old survey post leans between 2 trees, almost swallowed by bark. The metal cap has been struck with a hammer so many times the original number is hard to read. Rook drew this post on page 32. Next to it he wrote, "Everyone turns west here, because the 1934 map says west. Check 1912 bearing." You compare the line he drew with the compass in his backpack. The needle drifts. At first you think the compass is damaged. Then it swings again as you move closer to a dark band of rock crossing the slope. Magnetite. Enough iron in the stone to pull an old compass off bearing. A few degrees of compass error sounds trivial until you see what it does to the route. A person using a compass here in 1911 could have written down a perfectly honest direction that would lead later searchers to the wrong ridge. Rook had noticed. The famous route did not move on the maps because surveyors were careless. The bearing itself may have been wrong from the beginning. That correction makes one crossed out line in his journal useful. He had corrected for the magnetic pull. The new bearing leads uphill, not toward the white face, away from it. For the next hour, every step makes the old photograph less useful, and Rook's notes more important. You pass a dry drainage he labeled False Creek. You find 2 square nails hammered into a stump at shoulder height. On the next page, he had drawn those nails exactly, with a note. Not mining, telegraph. There has not been a telegraph line here for more than a century. But if those nails once held a wire, the line would have crossed the slope at almost the same angle as the old wagon road. Now Rook's method makes sense. He kept rebuilding the landscape instead of simply following the map. He was not trying to find where things are now. He was trying to see where they were in 1911. The forest had grown over roads, creeks had shifted, slides had buried cuts. Fires had erased cabins, but iron, stone, and old cuts in the terrain survived. And one of those cuts appears less than 200 yards ahead. It is a shallow bench carved into the hillside, too flat to be natural and too narrow to be a modern road. Grass and young trees cover most of it. If you were not looking for it, you would walk across it without noticing. Rook called it the Ghost Road. His journal says he found it 3 days before he disappeared. For the first time, the trail feels current. You are no longer following a legend from 1911. You are following a man from 2006. The Ghost Road bends north toward a slope of broken granite. Just before it fades out, you find a fork that is not drawn on the modern map. The left branch looks more convincing. It is wider, flatter, and it heads directly toward the pale rock visible through the trees. Every instinct says to take it. Rook crossed that branch out so violently the pencil tore the paper. Next to it he wrote, "Too easy. Built later, you check the ground. The cut is cleaner. The grade is gentler. There are fragments of machine-drilled rock along one edge. It is an old logging spur, probably decades newer than the payroll. This time, the false lead is not a pencil line. You are standing in it, and it explains something about Rook's 9-year search. The landscape is full of routes that look older than they are. If you begin with the legend and search for things that resemble a legend, you can make almost any old road feel correct. Rook eventually reversed the process. He stopped asking what looked right and started asking what could be proven to exist in 1911. The right branch is barely a road at all. It bends north, then ends at a slope of broken granite. Rook's map shows a small square 50 yards beyond the end of it. No label, just a square and a key symbol. You still have the brass key from his backpack. The square turns out to be a cabin foundation, or what is left of one. 4 stone footings, a collapsed chimney, rusted stove parts, a few boards sunk into the ground. There is no door for the key to open. For 10 minutes you search anyway, nothing. Then you notice the chimney stones are blackened on only one side. The cabin did not burn down in place. Someone dismantled it, or moved most of the wood before the fire that scorched the remaining stones. Rook noticed that too. He wrote, "If the cabin moved, storage may not have." You check around the largest footing. Under a flat stone is a rusted steel box the size of a loaf of bread. The brass key turns. Inside there is no gold. There is a coil of rotten survey tape, 2 glass vials, a corroded pencil, and an envelope wrapped in waxed cloth. The envelope is not from 1911. It is from 2006. Rook left it there. Inside is a single sheet of paper with 3 numbers, a rough drawing of the ridge, and 1 sentence. 1 coin is enough to prove the box survived. You read it twice, then a 3rd time. Until this moment, every clue could still belong to a man, convincing himself he was close. Treasure hunters are good at turning coincidence into progress. A road becomes the road. A pale rock becomes the rock. A bent nail becomes evidence, because evidence is what they need it to be. But the note in the locked box is different. Rook had reduced the whole legend to one test: recover a single coin from the strongbox itself. Not a matching date from a dealer, not a coin found somewhere along the trail. 1 coin in the right physical context. Whatever he believed, he had given himself a test that could fail. Now you know exactly what would count as proof. The question is whether Rook ever found it. The 3 numbers on the page look like coordinates. but they are incomplete. They could be elevations, bearings, distances. You compare them with the journal and find the same numbers written near the photograph, each beside a tiny triangle. They are angles. Rook was triangulating something. You return to the old photo. The pale white face in the background, the blurred dark rock near the camera, the line of the wagon, the slope behind the men. If the picture was taken from the ghost road, the white face should sit almost due west. It does not. Not from the cabin, not from the survey post, not from anywhere you have stood. So either Rook was wrong, or the published photograph had been reversed during reproduction. That sounds almost too convenient. So you look for something that cannot be explained by perspective. On the next page, Rook had taped a second photograph of the same wagon taken that season. A distinctive tear in the canvas cover sits on the opposite side. The wagon did not change sides. The reproduction was mirrored. You reverse the scene in your head. The entire layout changes. The white face is not west of the old road, it is east, across the drainage you just climbed out of. Now the final line in Rook's journal makes more sense. The white face is not the marker, it is the door. You can see it from where you are now. But seeing it creates another problem. The pale patch appears too small. In the old photograph, it dominates the background. From your position, it is only a thin, bright triangle through the trees. For a few minutes, you think the reversal theory has failed. Then you step backward onto the lower edge of the cabin bench. The foreground drops away. The pale patch rises behind the trees. More of its shape appears between the trunks. You move another 20 feet. Now the mountain, the tree line, and the angle of the old road begin to collapse into the same geometry as the photograph. Rook was not matching objects one at a time. He had been trying to find a single place where all of them became correct at once. There is only a narrow zone where that happens. And from that zone, a pale triangular patch of stone sits between dark trees, almost exactly like the photograph, except it is not a cliff, it is a slab. A single enormous piece of light granite leaning away from the mountain. The color matches the 3 pale flakes in Rook's film canister. From a distance, it looks like exposed bedrock. Up close, there is a shadow behind it, a gap. You cross the drainage. The closer you get, the more the landscape starts matching Rook's final sketches. 3 granite blocks, a dead pine trunk angled downhill, a spring that disappears beneath loose stone, instead of continuing across the surface. Then you find something that does not belong to 1911. Blue nylon cord, sun-bleached and brittle, trapped under a rock near the gap. Modern climbing cord. Rook's journal lists blue accessory cord in his gear inventory. He was here, not somewhere nearby, here. The opening behind the slab is barely wide enough for your shoulders. It drops 6 feet, then turns. You can feel cold air moving out of it. And for the first time, the backpack becomes strange in a new way. You found it more than a mile away. If Rook reached this opening, why was his pack down by the creek? The obvious answer is that something happened between the 2 places. But his journal gives you another possibility. 2 pages before the final entry, he wrote, "Final slot too tight. Leave frame pack at water, go light." The backpack was not lost. He left it behind on purpose. The implication is immediate. For 20 years, people assumed the backpack would tell them where Rook died. Instead, it tells you where he started his final attempt. You do not enter immediately. Cold air coming out of an opening is useful information, but it is not permission. You shine a light into the slot. The first turn is visible, the second is not. Loose stone has collected where water once ran through. There is no sign of a deep vertical drop, but there is also no room to turn around comfortably with a full pack. Rook's decision to leave his frame pack near the creek feels less mysterious now. Even a compact day pack would catch on the rock. You slip Rook's journal into a waterproof sleeve Take a light and a fresh length of cord and leave everything bulky outside. Then you squeeze through the gap. The passage turns downward between two slabs of granite and opens into a narrow chamber. There is no dramatic cave, no huge underground room, no carved door. Just stone, old water stains, and a floor covered in loose gravel. At the far end is a rusted iron strap. Then another. Then a piece of wood so dark with age it looks like stone. You brush gravel away. A corner appears, not a natural shape, a box, or what remains of one. The wood has collapsed inward. The iron bands are spread apart. A square lock plate lies loose near one edge. The strong box was here. For a few seconds, that is enough. A story repeated for more than a century becomes physical. The wagon route was real. The hiding place was real. The box made it into this mountain. Then you look inside, empty, almost. At the bottom, wedged between rotten wood and stone, are 3 dark coins stuck together with mineral crust. You lift one carefully. Gold does not rust. Even under dirt, the edge catches light. A $20 piece. The date fits the shipment. There are 2 more beneath it. Those 3 coins answer the test. Rook set in the locked box. 1 coin is enough to prove the box survived. He found 3. Rook had not guessed. He had been inside this chamber. He had touched this box. He had found the treasure. But if that is true, the biggest question is no longer whether he reached it. It is what happened next. The missing payroll was supposed to contain far more than 3 coins, along with bullion and cash, even allowing for exaggerated records. Theft before the shipment entered the mountains, or bags removed by the original men. 3 coins are residue, not treasure. If this chamber held the payroll, something removed almost all of it, and the condition of the box tells you that removal did not happen all at once. Some wood failed naturally. Some iron straps were forced outward. One corner of the box appears to have collapsed after years of water damage, but another section has saw marks on it. Clean, narrow cuts made by a modern tool. Someone, in recent decades, opened what the mountain had not already opened for them. The broken wood is stained with dark lines where canvas bags once rested. A few strands of rotted fabric are still trapped under an iron band. There are scrape marks on the floor leading toward the passage. Some of those marks are old enough to belong to the original box. Some are not. One groove cuts through mineral deposits that formed after the wood began rotting. Beside, it is a tiny strip of blue synthetic fiber, the same color as Rook's cord outside. At minimum, Rook worked against this box. You search the chamber more carefully. Behind the broken box, under a shelf of stone, your fingers hit metal. A small tobacco tin. The lid has been wrapped with electrical tape that turned brittle years ago. Inside is a folded page. The torn edge matches a blank leaf missing near the back of Rook's journal. He must have taken the loose sheet with him when he left the frame pack by the water. The handwriting is Rook's. The date is July 18, 2006, one day after the unfinished entry. So the broken sentence in the journal was not the last thing he wrote. For 20 years, anyone imagining Rook's final minutes would have put them near the unfinished sentence. Maybe he heard something. Maybe he fell. Maybe the line stopped because the event that killed him happened while the journal was open. The torn page destroys that entire picture. He finished the thought somewhere else. He entered the chamber. He had enough time to assess the box, move gold, return, write on the loose page, seal it in a tin, and hide it behind stone. Whatever caused him to disappear happened later. You unfold the page. I was right about the photograph. The slab is the entrance. The box is here, but the floor gave way under the back corner and split 2 bags. There is more gold than I can move safely in one trip. I carried 1 small bag to the north shelf before dark, came back for the rest. Storm building over the pass. If the creek rises, the pack can wait. There is 1 more line. Do not use the water route again. That is all. No confession. No explanation for where he went. but it proves something search teams never knew. Rook did not vanish on his way to the treasure. He vanished after he found it, and he had already moved at least one bag. You go back outside and study the phrase North Shelf. The journal never labels anything by that name. There is no shelf on the map, no coordinate, no obvious ledge north of the slab. But the old photograph has one more detail Rook kept measuring from the beginning. That blurred black shape near the camera. You assumed it was a boulder, maybe everyone did. Now, standing behind the white slab, you can see a rock shelf on the north side of the drainage. Looking back toward the cabin bench, you can finally place it. From the camera position you identified earlier, the shelf would cut into the lower corner, exactly where the dark blur appears. The photograph was not only locating the entrance, it had recorded the north shelf in the foreground. You climb toward the shelf. At first there is no trail. Then, about 30 yards above the drainage, the pattern changes. Small stones have been kicked downhill from the same narrow line. A branch was cut years ago rather than broken naturally. Lichen is missing from one handhold on a low slab. Individually, none of those things proves anything after 20 years. Together, they make a route. Rook had been moving between the chamber and the shelf. The route is steep and dry. No creek, no obvious trail. Exactly what Rook's final note warned him to use instead of the water route. Halfway up, you find a rusted piton hammered into a crack, then a second. Neither is old enough to be from 1911. At the top, the shelf is larger than it looked from below, a flat strip of granite, hidden by trees from almost every direction. There is no treasure sitting in the open. There is, however, a shallow depression beneath an overhang, where the soil has a different color. You dig with your hands. 5 inches down, you hit canvas. Your mind jumps through 3 possibilities at once: gold, Rook's gear, or remains. You pull it free. It is an old coin sack, empty. The fabric is rotten, but a faded stenciled number remains near the seam. It matches one of the bag numbers Rook copied from the mine's 1911 shipment ledger. This bag came from the payroll, and Rook moved it here. But the gold that was inside is gone. Under the sack is a short length of rope and a metal buckle from a waist belt. Rook's gear list includes the same model of belt. There is no body, no bones, no wallet, no sign that he died on this shelf. Just evidence that he carried treasure here. What happened after that is not recorded. You sit for a moment and let the timeline rebuild itself. On July 17, Rook finally matched the photograph to the white slab. On July 18, he entered the chamber, opened or found the collapsed strongbox, and discovered the payroll still inside. He moved at least one small bag to the north shelf. A storm was coming. He planned to return for the backpack by the creek later. He never did. 20 years later, runoff exposed that backpack. The chamber still holds a few coins, but not enough to explain the shipment. The north shelf holds an empty payroll sack, which means at some point after Rook reached this ledge, the gold moved again. There are only a few possibilities. The simplest is that Rook moved it himself, and if he did, the empty bag may have been deliberate. A heavy canvas sack is useful inside a chamber, but conspicuous on a trail. He could have transferred the coins into smaller containers, buried them temporarily, or carried them in several loads. Another possibility is that someone reached the shelf after him. The search area in 2006 was large, and not every person in the mountains was part of the official search. Rook had spent years talking to miners, landowners, record clerks, and other treasure hunters. He was secretive. But secrets do not have to be completely exposed to become dangerous. Someone only has to know the general place and wait for the person with better information to make progress. There is no evidence here strong enough to choose between those possibilities. It would be easy to invent a villain because a villain makes the story cleaner. The evidence does not earn that conclusion. What it gives you is a sequence of physical facts and one unresolved location. The treasure may still be hidden somewhere between this shelf and the place Rook intended to take it. Next, the journal gives one last clue, but it does not look like one until you stop thinking about treasure. On the inside back cover, beneath a list of food and batteries, Rook wrote a sentence weeks before he disappeared. "If I ever find it, the hard part won't be getting in. It will be deciding where to go once I come out." At first, it sounds philosophical. Now it sounds practical. Rook knew that carrying gold back toward the trailhead would expose him. The creek crossing was the obvious route. His truck was registered. Searchers, hikers, anyone on the road could see him. If the treasure was real, finding it would create a new problem. How do you remove it without leading everyone back to the hiding place? That may be why he began studying the ridge north of the chamber. The map has a faint pencil line there, so light you almost missed it. It does not connect to the trailhead. It goes over the pass. On the other side is an old logging road that was already abandoned in 2006. The distance from the north shelf to that road is a little under 3 miles. Far enough to avoid the trailhead. Close enough to carry smaller loads over several trips. And unlike the creek route, most of it is hidden from the valley below. Rook marked a small circle beside it. No label, no note. Just a circle. You could follow it. You catch yourself staring at the circle longer than you should. One solved route has already pulled you this far, and now another one is waiting. But before you go anywhere, you return to the chamber one final time. There is something you almost missed beneath the collapsed wood. A brass plate from the strong box lid. Most of the lettering is gone, but part of the maker's mark and the last 4 digits of a serial number remain. They match the box description and serial Rook copied from the shipment record in the first third of his journal. This is not a similar box, it is the box. The missing payroll was hidden behind the white slab in 1911. Alden Rook found it in 2006. He was not 1 mile away. He was not one clue away. He was not almost there. He got there. He opened the place every other searcher failed to identify for nearly 100 years. He held the coins. He moved at least one bag, and sometime after that, he disappeared so completely that the backpack he intentionally left by the water became the first piece of him anyone found in 2 decades. The backpack means something different now. When you pulled it from the creek, it looked like the remains of a failed hunt. It was not. It was evidence of a successful one. The journal did not stop because Rook ran out of clues. It stopped because he left the frame pack and the journal inside it before the final push. By the time he wrote again on the loose page, the hunt itself was over. The next problem was getting the treasure out. You leave the 3 loose coins where you found them and photograph everything in place. The sky beyond the trees has started turning the dull gray color that usually means weather is moving over the pass. 20 years ago, Rook saw a storm coming too. The gray sky makes his last note feel uncomfortably current. You stand at the white slab with his journal open to the unfinished line. The entrance is inside. Now you know how the sentence probably ended. Inside the white face, inside the slab, inside the mountain. But the more interesting sentence is the one he wrote later and hid in the chamber. I carried one small bag to the north shelf before dark, because the bag is still there, and the gold is not. Somewhere between this mountain and whatever happened to Alden Rook, a treasure worth millions changed hands, changed hiding places, or disappeared for a second time. Maybe Rook carried it over the pass. Maybe he buried it before the storm. Maybe he decided that vanishing with a small fortune was safer than returning to a life where everyone knew exactly what he had been searching for. Or maybe there is another explanation buried in the faint pencil line leading north. You do not know yet. But you know the answer to the question that brought you this far. How close did the missing treasure hunter get? He found the road everyone missed. He corrected the compass error. He realized the famous photograph had been printed backward. He found the white slab. He entered the chamber. He touched the strong box. He carried at least one bag of the payroll out of the mountain. He did not disappear looking for the treasure. He disappeared after finding it. And 20 years later, the only reason you know any of this is because a storm moved a creek just far enough to uncover backpack he meant to come back for. The forest is quiet when you leave the slab. The old ghost road is almost invisible again by the time you reach the trees. Behind you, the pale rock disappears into the slope, exactly the way it must have disappeared to searchers for a century. Ahead of you, Rook's map is folded to the faint line over the North Pass. At the end of that line is one unlabeled circle. And for the first time all day, the journal is no longer telling you where Rook went. It is asking whether you are willing to follow.